Have you ever worked for years to achieve something, only to find that the feeling of fulfillment slips through your fingers almost as soon as you have it? Maybe it was getting the promotion you dreamed about, buying the house you saved for, or finally reaching a level of comfort you thought would bring lasting peace. For a moment there is excitement, but soon after an old question creeps back in. Is this all there is? This quiet emptiness does not only haunt celebrities and world leaders, it shows up in ordinary lives too. Someone might graduate with honors yet feel lost the next morning. Another might reach financial security yet lie awake wondering why life still feels incomplete. We live in a culture that constantly tells us to chase happiness, to maximize pleasure, to collect milestones. And yet for many, the more we chase, the less satisfied we feel. It is like pouring water into a bucket with a hole in it. No matter how much we add, it never stays full. We try to patch the hole with new achievements, new relationships, new distractions, but the sense of lack always returns. Deep down, most of us have had moments where we realize that the life we were told to pursue does not guarantee meaning. So maybe the question we are asking is the wrong one. Instead of asking, how can I be happy, perhaps the deeper question is, why does happiness fade so quickly and what lies beneath that restless search? This shift in perspective is where Buddhist teachings invite us to look not for another quick fix, but for a more enduring kind of freedom. We live in a time when the pursuit of happiness has become almost a command. Advertisements promise joy if we buy the right product. Self-help books assure us that we can engineer a perfect life if we just adopt the right habits. Social media parades endless images of smiling faces, exotic vacations, and flawless achievements. The message is constant and subtle. You should be happy all the time. If you are not, then something must be wrong with you. And yet the reality of our lives tells a different story. Happiness comes, but it does not stay. We reach a goal and feel a surge of pride, but soon it fades. We fall in love and bask in the warmth of connection, but later conflict and distance appear. We take a vacation and enjoy the scenery, but when we return home, the same stresses and worries are waiting. No matter how much we add to our lives, the sense of lack always returns. This is what some teachers call the happiness paradox. The more you chase happiness as a goal in itself, the more elusive it becomes. It is like trying to fall asleep by telling yourself to sleep harder. The very effort keeps you awake. In the same way, the effort to be happy often fuels anxiety and disappointment. We blame ourselves for not feeling good enough. We compare ourselves to others who seem more joyful. We try to force a state of mind that cannot be forced. A powerful image for this dilemma is the leaky bucket. Imagine carrying a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much water you pour in, it keeps draining out. You can keep filling it, and for a moment it seems full, but soon it is empty again. Our lives often feel the same. We pour in achievements, pleasures, possessions, relationships, but the satisfaction slips away. We keep chasing the next thing, hoping it will finally fill us. But the bucket remains leaky. This is not only a spiritual metaphor. Modern psychology has studied the phenomenon and given it a name: the hedonic treadmill. It describes how human beings quickly adapt to positive changes. We win the lottery, and within months our happiness returns to its baseline. We buy a new car, and soon it feels ordinary. We fall in love, and the excitement eventually gives way to routine. Like a treadmill, we keep running but never arrive. Dopamine, the chemical of reward in our brains, spikes with novelty but quickly fades. The system is designed not for lasting satisfaction but for continual seeking. So what are we to do if happiness keeps slipping through our fingers? If the bucket always leaks, should we simply resign ourselves to emptiness? This is where the wisdom of Buddhist teaching enters like a fresh wind. The Buddha did not deny the reality of joy, but he pointed out that seeking joy as the ultimate goal will always fail. The key is not to pour more water into the bucket, but to examine the hole itself. The real question is not how can I be happy, but why does happiness fade, and what is the nature of suffering? This shift in questioning may seem small, but it changes everything. Instead of chasing one more pleasure, one more success, one more fix, you turn to face the restless hunger itself. Why is it that no matter what I achieve, I still feel incomplete? Why is it that the excitement of pleasure is always followed by disappointment? What is this craving that drives me, and is there another way to live? The Buddha's insight was both simple and radical. He saw that craving or thirst is at the root of suffering, not just the desire for food or shelter, but the constant craving for things to be different from how they are. We crave more pleasure, less pain. We crave security in an uncertain world. We crave identity and meaning to protect us from the fear of insignificance. And yet life is impermanent. Pleasure fades, pain comes, circumstances shift. No craving can ever be fully satisfied for long. Understanding this is not meant to depress us, it is meant to free us. Because once you see the pattern clearly, you can step off the treadmill. You can stop pouring endlessly into the leaky bucket. You can begin to relate to life differently. Only by recognizing the problem can we begin to heal. In modern terms, this means we must allow ourselves to feel. Instead of covering pain with constant distraction, we turn toward it with awareness. Instead of asking, how can I feel good all the time, we ask, what is this feeling and what can it teach me? This is what psychologists now call reframing. By changing the question, we change our relationship to the problem. For example, imagine someone who loses their job. The first reaction may be panic, anger, or shame. If the only question is how can I be happy again, they may rush to find distractions, shopping, entertainment, substances to avoid the pain. But if the question is what is this suffering and what does it reveal, a deeper process begins. They may see how much of their identity was tied to external success. They may realize that change, though painful, opens new possibilities. They may learn resilience and compassion for others in similar struggles. In this way, suffering itself becomes a teacher. The same principle applies to smaller frustrations. Stuck in traffic, we can rage and complain, or we can notice the craving for things to be different. Hungry late at night, we can binge to fill the void, or we can notice the craving for comfort. Lonely at a party, we can judge ourselves, or we can see the craving for approval. In every case, the craving is the thread that leads us into suffering. And by noticing it, by understanding it, we take the first step toward freedom. This is the turning point the Buddha offered to humanity. Stop chasing happiness as if it were a possession. Stop blaming yourself for not feeling good all the time. Instead, turn inward. Understand the nature of desire, the impermanence of pleasure, the universality of suffering. By doing so, you open the possibility of a peace that does not depend on conditions. This teaching does not reject joy. It simply places joy in its proper place. Joy is welcome, but it is not the foundation. The foundation is freedom. Freedom to feel joy without clinging. Freedom to feel pain without despairing. Freedom to live with open eyes in a world that is always changing. And here is the paradox. When you stop chasing happiness, when you stop making it your goal, genuine happiness arises more naturally. Not the fragile happiness of perfect circumstances, but the steady happiness of being at ease with life as it island. This happiness is not excitement, but contentment. Not a high, but a calm. Not a chase, but a rest. For modern audiences, this may be the most important message of all. Because we live in a culture of constant craving, fueled by advertising, technology, and comparison, the pressure to be happy is itself a source of suffering. To step off that treadmill, to breathe deeply and accept the imperfection of the moment, is a revolutionary act. It is the beginning of true freedom. The story of how these insights first came to light is itself a lesson in what it means to search for meaning. Long before he became known as the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama was a prince. He was born into privilege, surrounded by wealth, protected by walls that shielded him from the harsher sides of life. His father wanted him to inherit the throne and live as a ruler untouched by suffering. So Siddhartha grew up in a world carefully curated to keep him happy, surrounded by music, luxury, and comfort. But no amount of comfort could keep out reality forever. As the story goes, Siddhartha ventured beyond the palace walls and encountered 4 sights that shattered his illusions. First, he saw an old man bent and frail. Then he saw someone suffering with disease. Then he saw a corpse lifeless and still. These 3 sights revealed to him the inescapable truths of aging, illness, and death. But the 4th sight gave him hope. He saw a wandering monk, calm and serene, someone who had renounced worldly attachments in search of deeper freedom. Those moments planted a seed that would change not only Siddhartha's life, but the history of human thought. He realized that no amount of pleasure or achievement could protect him from the reality of suffering. He saw that wealth could not prevent sickness, power could not stop aging, and even love could not shield him from death. If all human beings must face these realities, then there had to be another way of living, another way of seeing. This realization led him to make a radical choice. He left the palace, left his family, and began a journey to understand suffering and discover its remedy. Imagine the courage it takes to walk away from every comfort you have ever known, to leave not out of despair but out of a burning determination to find the truth. Siddhartha's decision was not an escape from responsibility, but a deeper embrace of it. He wanted to discover a path that could benefit not only himself, but everyone. His journey took him first to the extremes of asceticism. He joined wandering monks who practiced severe discipline fasting until their bodies wasted away, meditating for days without rest, denying themselves even the simplest comforts. The belief was that by crushing desire completely, by rejecting the body and the world, one might achieve liberation. Siddhartha pushed himself harder than anyone, nearly to the point of death. Yet in the end, he realized that this too was a dead end. Torturing the body did not bring freedom. It only brought more suffering. It was then that he discovered what would later be called the middle path. Not indulgence, not self-denial, but a balanced way of living that neither clings to pleasure nor runs from pain. The middle path is not about moderation in a shallow sense. It is about seeing clearly that freedom does not come from extremes. It comes from understanding, from awareness, from walking steadily between the traps of indulgence and avoidance. From this point, Siddhartha sat beneath a tree, determined not to rise until he had found the truth. Through long hours of meditation, he faced his own desires, fears, and illusions. He saw how craving tied him to suffering. He saw how impermanence meant that clinging could never bring security. He saw how awareness itself, untouched by the storms of the mind, was the doorway to freedom. When the dawn broke, he was awake, not just in body but in spirit. From that moment, he was called the Buddha, the one who has awakened. The essence of what he discovered was later expressed as the Four Noble Truths. The first truth is that life involves suffering. This is not pessimism but realism. Birth, aging, illness, death, separation from what we love, facing what we do not want. All of these are part of life. To deny them is to live in illusion. The second truth is that suffering has a cause. It arises from craving, from the endless thirst for things to be other than they are. We crave pleasure and fear its loss. We crave security in a world that is constantly changing. We crave identity in a self that is never fixed. This craving fuels dissatisfaction again and again. The third truth is that suffering can end. When craving is let go, when we stop clinging to impermanent things as though they could give us permanent fulfillment, then suffering loses its grip. This does not mean pain disappears, but the suffering built on craving dissolves. In that freedom, peace arises naturally. The fourth truth is the path that leads to this freedom, known as the Noble Eightfold Path. It is not a set of commandments, but a guide to living with wisdom, ethical action, and mindful awareness. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These are the stepping stones of a life lived in alignment with awareness. For modern people, this ancient teaching is surprisingly relevant. In a culture of extremes, workaholism on one side, distraction and indulgence on the other, the middle path feels like a radical alternative. It tells us that we do not need to run from life or chase it endlessly. We need to live in balance with clarity and compassion. Take right speech as an example. In an age of social media where words are thrown around carelessly, how different would our world be if more people spoke with honesty, kindness, and responsibility? Right livelihood is another. Imagine the shift if more people chose careers not just for profit but for their impact on others and the planet. Right mindfulness is perhaps the most urgent for our time. Surrounded by distractions, training the mind to be present is both a personal refuge and a social necessity. The Eightfold Path is not about perfection but practice. Each step is a reminder that freedom is not a single event but a way of living. When we align our actions, speech, and thoughts with awareness, life feels lighter. We are no longer slaves to craving. We are no longer pulled back and forth by every desire and fear. We begin to walk with a steadiness that others can feel. This is the enduring gift of the Buddha's discovery. He did not claim to be a god or a prophet with secret revelations. He was a human being who saw deeply into the nature of life and shared a path that anyone can walk. His message was not that we must escape the world, but that we can live in it with freedom even amidst suffering. For a person in the modern world surrounded by pressure and noise, this path may be more needed than ever. The temptation to seek constant pleasure is stronger than it was in Siddhartha's time, amplified by technology that delivers endless stimulation. At the same time, the temptation to despair, to withdraw, to numb ourselves is just as present. The middle path is a reminder that neither extreme will set us free. Freedom lies in awareness, in presence, in walking steadily between the two. What does this look like in daily life? It may mean eating mindfully instead of rushing through meals. It may mean pausing to breathe before reacting in anger. It may mean choosing work that nourishes rather than depletes you. It may mean spending time in silence instead of constant distraction. These are simple acts, but each one is a step on the path. Over time, the Eightfold Path shapes not only individuals but communities. Families that practice mindful listening create harmony. Workplaces that value ethical livelihoods create dignity. Societies that cultivate compassion create resilience. The ripple effect begins with one person who chooses to live differently. And so the story of Siddhartha is not just an ancient tale, but a mirror for our own lives. Each of us is born into some form of palace, a bubble of comfort or distraction that shields us from reality. Each of us eventually encounters the sights that awaken us: aging, illness, death, or the example of someone living with peace. Each of us must decide whether to keep chasing comfort or to turn toward truth. And each of us has the capacity to walk a middle path, to live with awareness and to find freedom. Once we begin to understand the essence of the middle path and the Four Noble Truths, something profound starts to shift in the way we see happiness itself. We realize that the question is not about how to secure permanent happiness, but how to live with freedom in a world where joy and sorrow come and go. This shift is subtle but life-changing. It redefines what it means to live well, and it redefines what we think of as our purpose. Modern culture has trained us to equate purpose with success. We are told that our lives will matter if we climb high enough, earn enough, accumulate enough. Advertisements promise that fulfillment is just one more purchase away. Career coaches insist that we must discover our passion, or else risk wasting our potential. Social media amplifies the message by displaying curated snapshots of other people's victories, making us feel that if we are not extraordinary, we are falling behind. But the teaching of the Buddha offers a radical alternative. Purpose is not something we must chase in the future. It is not a trophy we earn by outcompeting others. Purpose is what naturally arises when we live in awareness, when we free ourselves from the tyranny of craving. It is not about becoming someone else, but about fully inhabiting the life we already have. This realization is both comforting and unsettling. It is comforting because it tells us that we do not need to endlessly chase meaning. It is unsettling because it removes the illusions we have relied on. If purpose is not in achievements, not in possessions, not in the approval of others, then where is it? It is here in presence itself. It is in the way we meet each moment, in the way we treat others, in the way we embody compassion and clarity. Consider someone who has spent decades climbing the corporate ladder. They have wealth, status, and recognition, but late at night, when the noise of the world dies down, they feel an emptiness they cannot explain. If purpose is defined only by external success, then emptiness is inevitable. But if purpose is found in awareness, in freedom from craving, then even the smallest acts become meaningful. A conversation with a child, a moment of silence before a meal, a breath taken with gratitude. These are not distractions from purpose, but expressions of it. The modern trap is that we confuse busyness with purpose. We run from task to task, project to project, filling every hour, and call it productivity. But beneath the surface, many of us sense the truth: activity without awareness is just another form of craving. It keeps us moving but never arriving. It is like running on that treadmill of pleasure and disappointment, mistaking motion for meaning. Awareness offers another way. To live with awareness is to step off the treadmill and realize that purpose is not in the distance, but in the step you are taking now. When you are present, even the simplest action is filled with significance. Washing a dish becomes a meditation. Walking down the street becomes a practice of connection. Listening to a friend becomes an act of compassion. This way of living does not mean abandoning ambition or refusing to set goals. It means holding them lightly. It means understanding that goals can guide us, but they are not the measure of our worth. It means knowing that failure does not diminish us and success does not complete us. We are already complete in awareness, and our purpose is simply to live from that truth. This perspective also changes how we see freedom. Many of us think of freedom as the ability to do whatever we want whenever we want. But if we look closer, we see that this is just another form of bondage. If we are driven by every craving, every impulse, every desire, then we are not free at all. We are slaves to the restless mind. True freedom is the ability to act without being ruled by craving. It is the ability to choose presence over distraction, compassion over fear, clarity over confusion. Imagine the difference between eating mindlessly and eating mindfully. In the first case, you may consume quickly, distracted by screens or thoughts, barely tasting the food, always reaching for more. In the second case, you pause, breathe, taste each bite fully. You are not rushing to finish, not craving the next thing. You are free in the moment. The same is true for every aspect of life. Freedom is not about doing more. It is about being more awake. And when you are awake, happiness returns in a different form. Not the fleeting highs of pleasure, not the fragile satisfaction of success, but a deeper contentment that arises from simply being present. This happiness does not depend on circumstances. It does not vanish when things go wrong. It is quieter, steadier, more reliable. It is the happiness of being at peace with the flow of life. One of the most powerful examples of this is found in people who have faced immense hardship yet radiate calm. A refugee who has lost everything but still smiles. A patient in the hospital who brings comfort to those around them. A teacher who lives simply but carries a joy that inspires generations. Their happiness does not come from possessions or achievements. It comes from freedom, from having let go of the need for life to be other than its island. This kind of happiness is not passive. It does not mean resigning ourselves to injustice or suffering. In fact, it fuels action. When we are no longer consumed by our own cravings, we have more energy to serve others. Compassion flows naturally. Creativity unfolds. Purpose is expressed not as something we manufacture, but as something that arises from our presence. In today's world, this message is both urgent and revolutionary. We are surrounded by crises, environmental, political, personal. Many of these crises are fueled by craving for more consumption, more power, more control. The middle path offers a different model. It tells us that freedom and purpose are not in accumulation, but in awareness. That a meaningful life is not about winning, but about waking up. For individuals in America, Europe, and Canada, cultures where achievement and consumption are so highly valued, this teaching can feel countercultural. It asks us to slow down in a society built on speed. It asks us to be present in a culture addicted to distraction. It asks us to accept impermanence in a world that sells permanence at every turn. But perhaps precisely because it is countercultural, it is also healing. Imagine if more people lived this way. If instead of endless comparison, we practiced presence. If instead of consuming compulsively, we acted from awareness. If instead of defining ourselves by achievements, we discovered our worth in the simple fact of being. Families would feel less pressure, workplaces would feel less toxic, societies would feel less divided. The ripple effect of awareness could transform not just individual lives, but the collective fabric of our world. This is why Buddhist teaching does not stop at individual practice. It always points outward. When you live in awareness, your presence influences others. Your steadiness helps calm those around you. Your compassion inspires theirs. Your clarity cuts through confusion. You may not see the full impact, but it matters. Just as a single candle can light many others without losing its flame, your awareness can ignite awareness in others. So as we continue to walk the path, we are invited to reframe both happiness and purpose. Happiness is not a possession to secure, but a quality of presence. Purpose is not a destination to reach, but a way of living. Freedom is not doing whatever we crave, but living without being ruled by craving. These truths are not abstract philosophy. They are practical, lived, embodied. They transform how we wake in the morning, how we speak to our families, how we work, how we rest, how we die. In the end, the Buddha's message is not about becoming extraordinary. It is about being fully human. To breathe with awareness, to walk with awareness, to act with compassion, that is enough. That is freedom. That is purpose. When we step back and look at the arc of this journey, it becomes clear that the real shift is not about finding a better strategy for happiness, but about stepping into a different relationship with life itself. We start by chasing the highs, believing that if we achieve enough or consume enough, fulfillment will finally arrive. But after chasing for years, we discover that the sense of completion never lasts. Then, through reflection or crisis, we begin to turn inward. We notice the craving itself, the restless thirst that drives us. And in that noticing, a new possibility opens. The possibility is not about adding more, but about seeing more clearly. Awareness becomes the ground beneath every experience. When you are awake to awareness, life is no longer measured only by highs and lows, by wins and losses. It is measured by presence, and presence turns even ordinary moments into sources of meaning. This realization can sound abstract until you live it. Consider the way you eat a meal. If you rush through it barely tasting the food, thinking about the next task, then the meal is just fuel. But if you pause, breathe, and taste each bite fully, something changes. You feel gratitude for the food, for the hands that prepared it, for the earth that grew it. You realize that nourishment is not only physical but also spiritual. The meal becomes an expression of connection. The same is true of conversation. How often do we listen only half-heartedly, planning our reply while the other person speaks, or scrolling on our phones while pretending to pay attention? But when you give your full presence, when you listen, as though nothing else matters, the connection deepens. You do not just exchange words, you share awareness. And in that space, healing happens. Relationships grow stronger, not because they are free of conflict, but because presence is strong enough to hold the conflict with care. Work too is transformed. In modern life, many people see work only as a means to an end, a way to earn money or secure status. But when approached with awareness, work becomes part of the path. Whether you are teaching, building, serving, or creating, the quality of presence you bring to the task matters as much as the outcome. Work done with awareness is infused with integrity. It nourishes rather than depletes, and it connects you to something larger than yourself, the flow of life expressed through your effort. Even rest changes. So often we collapse into distraction, calling it relaxation. We binge on entertainment or scroll endlessly, hoping to numb our exhaustion. But this is not true rest. True rest comes when you allow yourself to be fully present without needing to fill the silence. To lie down and breathe, to walk slowly in nature, to sit in stillness without distraction. These moments restore not only the body but the soul. As presence deepens, compassion arises naturally. You begin to see others not as obstacles or competitors, but as fellow travelers in the same fragile human journey. Their suffering is no longer invisible. You recognize it because you have learned to recognize your own. When you see the fear in someone's anger or the longing in their criticism, judgment softens. Compassion does not mean allowing harm, but it means responding with understanding rather than hatred. This shift changes not only your relationships, but the tone of your entire life. In a divided and distracted world, this kind of compassion is revolutionary. It is easy to argue, to condemn, to retreat into tribes. It is harder, but far more transformative, to meet others with awareness. Imagine if more conversations on social issues were rooted not in shouting, but in listening. Imagine if more communities chose compassion over blame, presence over polarization. The ripple effect of such a shift could change not only individuals, but the very fabric of society. And yet the beauty of this path is that it does not ask you to fix the whole world. It asks only that you live awake in your own life. The rest follows naturally. When you bring awareness to your breath, your steps, your words, the impact radiates outward. You cannot know how many lives you touch simply by being present. A kind word, a calm presence in crisis, a steady act of generosity. These may seem small, but their influence often outlives us. At the heart of it all lies a paradox. The purpose of life is not something to be found in the future. It is discovered in the act of living itself. Every time you are fully present, every time you breathe with awareness, every time you act with compassion, you are fulfilling your purpose. There is no need to wait, no need to prove yourself worthy. You are already enough because awareness is already here. This is why many Zen teachers emphasize the ordinariness of awakening. It is not about glowing visions or mystical powers. It is about chopping wood and carrying water with awareness. It is about caring for a child, answering an email, walking down the street, all done with presence. To live this way is to realize that nothing is missing, that every moment is complete in itself. For someone in the modern West, this message can feel liberating. So much of our culture is built on the idea of striving for more success, more possessions, more recognition. But striving without awareness is endless. There is always more to chase. When you live from awareness, the chase slows. You still set goals, you still pursue projects, but they are no longer desperate attempts to prove your worth. They are expressions of who you already are. Think of an artist painting not for fame, but because creativity flows naturally. Think of a parent caring for a child not for recognition, but from love. Think of a worker doing their job not just for a paycheck, but with care for the people it serves. In each case, purpose is not imposed from outside, but arises from within. As the search dissolves, gratitude grows. You begin to see how much has always been given. The breath you did not create, the body that carries you, the sunlight that warms you, the earth that supports you. Gratitude is not a practice to add, but a natural response to awareness. And gratitude itself becomes a form of freedom. It loosens the grip of craving by reminding you that life is already a gift. This shift also changes the way you face impermanence. Instead of fearing loss, you learn to treasure presence. You know that everything is passing, but instead of clinging, you savor. You savor the laughter of a friend, the beauty of a sunset, the quiet of a morning. You know it will not last, and that makes it even more precious. Impermanence stops being a threat and becomes a teacher, reminding you to live fully now. Death, too, takes on a different meaning. The fear of death is rooted in the belief that we are nothing but our bodies and stories. But when you know yourself as awareness, you see that awareness has no birth and no death. The body will fall, the stories will fade, but awareness is the open space in which all of it appeared. To rest in that knowing is to face mortality with more peace. It does not erase grief, but it brings courage. In the end, the path is not about becoming extraordinary. It is about becoming fully human. To breathe deeply, to walk gently, to love freely, to live awake, this is enough. This is the purpose that people so often miss when they chase it outside themselves. When you live this way, your life becomes both ordinary and sacred. You may not change the whole world, but you change the world around you. And sometimes that is the most meaningful change of all. So the invitation is simple. Pause, breathe, notice awareness, noticing. Allow yourself to live, not in the chase, but in the presence. Let compassion flow naturally. Let gratitude arise. Let your life be an expression of the freedom that has always been here. That is purpose. That is happiness. That is freedom. As the path unfolds, there comes a point when you begin to see the pattern of your life with new eyes. The striving that once consumed you no longer feels as urgent. The comparisons that once haunted you begin to lose their grip. The old belief that happiness was always somewhere just beyond your reach starts to fade. What takes its place is not passivity, but presence. Presence is the quiet confidence of knowing that life is happening now, and that now is enough. When you live this way, even failure takes on a new meaning. In the old mindset, failure was proof of inadequacy. It was something to hide, something that threatened your worth. But from the ground of awareness, failure is simply another wave passing through the ocean. It does not define the ocean. You may feel disappointment, you may feel pain, but awareness itself remains untouched. And in that steadiness you discover resilience. You can learn from mistakes without being crushed by them. You can rise again without carrying the heavy burden of shame. Success, too, is redefined. Instead of being a measure of how much you have accumulated or how far you have climbed, success becomes the depth of your presence. Did you live this moment fully? Did you act with integrity? Did you meet others with compassion? Did you remember who you are beyond the restless mind? These questions matter more than titles or trophies because they measure life from inside out rather than from the outside in. This perspective begins to change the way you move through each day. Imagine starting the morning not with frantic checking of emails or social feeds, but with a single conscious breath. Imagine entering a meeting not with the pressure to dominate, but with the intention to listen. Imagine ending the day not by collapsing into distraction, but by sitting quietly for a few minutes, grateful for the gift of being alive. These small shifts accumulate. Over time, they shape the quality of your entire life. The beauty of this approach is that it does not require special conditions. You do not need to live in a monastery or retreat to a mountain. You can practice awareness in the middle of city traffic, in the chaos of family life, in the stress of a demanding job. The circumstances may be noisy, but awareness is always available, waiting like a still lake beneath the surface. Each time you remember to pause, each time you bring attention to the breath, you touch that stillness. And the more often you touch it, the more it becomes your home. Awareness also reshapes how you relate to others. In the old way of seeing, other people were often obstacles or tools, people to compete with, people to impress, people to avoid. But when you see from awareness, others appear as fellow expressions of life, just as you are. Their struggles are no longer distant, their joys are no longer irrelevant. You begin to feel a natural empathy, not because you force it, but because you recognize your shared humanity. This recognition can transform conflict. Instead of reacting immediately with anger, you pause. You see the pain beneath the harsh words. You recognize the fear behind the aggression. You may still set boundaries. You may still speak firmly, but your response comes from clarity rather than reactivity, and that difference can change the course of a relationship. It can turn confrontation into dialogue, hostility into understanding. Compassion in this sense is not a virtue to display, but a natural extension of awareness. It flows without effort like light from the Sunday, and just as sunlight nurtures without discrimination, compassion touches everyone, even those who seem undeserving. This does not mean allowing harm, but it does mean seeing through the layers of behavior to the awareness that shines beneath. When you relate to others from this depth, you help awaken that same depth in them. As presence deepens, gratitude also grows. You begin to see how much has always been given to you, the breath that sustains you without asking for permission, the body that carries you through the years, the earth that provides food and shelter. Gratitude is not forced but spontaneous, a quiet awe at the miracle of being alive. And gratitude itself becomes a practice of freedom, because it shifts attention from what is lacking to what is already here. This way of seeing also transforms your relationship with impermanence. In the old mindset, impermanence was a threat. We feared losing what we loved, feared the changes that life inevitably brings. But from awareness, impermanence is no longer the enemy. It is the very condition that makes life precious. Flowers are beautiful because they fade. Sunsets move us because they vanish. Relationships matter because they do not last forever. Impermanence teaches us to savor, to hold gently, to love without clinging. Even death, the great shadow that looms over human life, begins to soften. The body will die, yes. The stories of the self will end. But awareness itself, the open space in which all of life has unfolded, cannot die because it was never born. To glimpse this truth is to face mortality with more peace. Fear may still arise, but it is held differently. Death is no longer the annihilation of what you are, but the transformation of form within the boundless field of awareness. And so the journey that began with restlessness and craving ends not with a dramatic resolution, but with a simple recognition. What you sought was never missing. Happiness, freedom, purpose, all of them were hidden in plain sight, woven into the fabric of awareness itself. The chase was never necessary. The only task was to stop, breathe, and notice. This does not mean life becomes free of challenge. Storms will still come. Pain will still visit. But now you know the sky is larger than the storm. You know that beneath every rise and fall, awareness remains steady. And that knowledge changes everything. It allows you to live with courage, to act with integrity, to meet others with compassion, to savor the fleeting beauty of each moment. This is the heart of the teaching. The purpose of life is not found in extraordinary achievements or distant promises. It is found in the ordinary act of living awake, to breathe as a free person, to walk as a free person, to meet each moment with presence. That is enough. That is freedom. That is purpose. Perhaps this is the final paradox. You began by asking what the meaning of life is, hoping for a grand answer. And in the end, the answer is disarmingly simple. The meaning of life is life itself. To be here, to be aware, to be alive, that is the gift. To live it with presence is to honor it. To share it with compassion is to fulfill it. Nothing more is required. Nothing less will do. So as you take your next breath, remember, you do not need to chase. You do not need to prove. You do not need to become. You need only to be. In that being, happiness arises naturally, freedom reveals itself, and purpose blossoms. This is the way of awareness. This is the invitation of the path, and it is available always here now. As awareness deepens, you begin to realize that this journey was never only about you. From the start, it may have felt like a personal quest. How can I be happy? How can I find purpose? How can I free myself from suffering? But once the grip of craving begins to loosen, the circle widen. The peace you discover within yourself naturally flows outward. It begins to touch the lives around you, sometimes without you even noticing. Think of how the presence of one calm person can steady an entire room. In moments of crisis, when everyone else is panicking, the calm voice, the steady breath, the grounded presence becomes an anchor. Awareness is like that. When you live awake, your steadiness does not stop with you. It ripples outward into your family, your workplace, your community. The people around you feel it. They may not be able to name it, but they sense it. And sometimes, sensing it, they begin to remember something in themselves. This is why the teachings of awareness and compassion are not just personal practices, but social ones. In a divided world where fear and anger so often dominate, the choice to live awake becomes an act of resistance. It resists the pull of distraction, the addiction to comparison, the spiral of hostility. It offers another way of being, one grounded in clarity and kindness. And though it may seem small, these small acts add up. Just as one candle can light another without losing its flame, awareness spreads. Consider what might happen if presence became more common in daily life. Imagine schools where children were taught not only math and science, but also how to pause, breathe, and notice their thoughts without judgment. Imagine workplaces where meetings began with a moment of silence, reminding everyone to listen before reacting. Imagine communities where people gathered not just to argue, but to share space in stillness, recognizing their shared humanity before discussing their differences. These are not fantasies. They are possibilities that begin with individuals choosing to live differently. Of course, awareness does not solve every problem. Injustice still exists. Suffering still arises. But awareness changes the way we respond. Instead of reacting blindly, we act with clarity. Instead of being consumed by fear, we act from courage. Instead of being trapped in hatred, we act from compassion. Awareness does not erase difficulty, but it makes us capable of meeting difficulty with dignity. The ripple of awareness can also reshape how we treat the earth. So much of environmental destruction is fueled by craving. The craving for more consumption, more convenience, more profit. When awareness enters the picture, the pattern shifts. We begin to see that the earth is not a resource to exploit, but a home to care for. Gratitude for the air, the water, the soil leads naturally to responsibility. Living awake means living lightly, respecting the web of life that sustains us. This too is part of purpose. To live with awareness is not only to free yourself, but to contribute to the healing of the world. Yet, even as awareness transforms relationships and communities, its deepest gift remains intimate. It brings you back again and again to the miracle of the present moment. No matter how far you travel, no matter what insights you gain, the path always circles back to this breath, this step, this awareness. And in that circle, you realize that the journey was never about reaching a distant goal. It was about waking up to what has always been here. This recognition brings a profound simplicity. You stop needing life to be extraordinary. You no longer measure your worth by how much you have achieved or how far you have gone. You find fulfillment in the ordinary, drinking tea, walking in the rain, laughing with a friend, watching the light change on the horizon. These moments, so often overlooked, reveal themselves as sacred. They carry the fullness of life. And when you are present for them, you realize that nothing is missing. Even in moments of struggle, presence changes everything. Pain still comes, but you no longer feel crushed. Fear still arises, but you see it for what it is, a passing wave. Uncertainty still lingers, but you learn to rest in it without needing to control everything. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. And when clinging dissolves, life feels lighter, freer, more open. The final paradox is that the search for meaning dissolves in the discovery that life itself is the meaning. For years you may have asked, why am I here? What is my purpose? You may have chased answers through achievements, relationships, philosophies, but in the end the answer is simple, almost too simple. You are here to live. You are here to be awake. You are here to love, to learn, to give, to receive. Purpose is not somewhere else. It is here in the way you inhabit this moment. And so the journey closes where it began with the breath. Breathe as a free person, and you honor the truth that freedom was always within you. Walk as a free person, and you embody the truth that every step is both the path and the arrival. Live as a free person, and you offer that freedom to the world, not through perfection but through presence. In the end, this is the teaching. Not to become extraordinary, not to escape the human condition, but to live fully as you are. To embrace impermanence with gratitude, to meet suffering with compassion, to savor joy without clinging, to face death without fear. To remember again and again that awareness has never left you. The meaning of life is not hidden. It is revealed in the act of living itself. The invitation is always the same. Pause, breathe, notice, be here. This is the miracle. This is the freedom. This is the purpose. When you begin to live with this awareness, something remarkable happens. Life stops feeling like a race you are destined to lose. It becomes more like a song unfolding in rhythm, sometimes soft and sometimes intense, but always alive. You no longer chase every note, desperately afraid of missing something. You listen, you participate, you allow the music to carry you. And in that shift, what once felt fragmented begins to feel whole. This wholeness is not about perfection. It is not about living without mistakes, doubts, or fears. It is about seeing that mistakes, doubts, and fears all arise within awareness, and awareness is never damaged by them. It holds everything without judgment. The same awareness that witnesses your joy also witnesses your sorrow. The same awareness that carries your confidence also carries your shame. When you see this, you stop fighting yourself. You begin to live with more gentleness. This gentleness transforms the way you treat others as well. When you recognize that awareness is not personal but universal, that it shines through every person you meet, you cannot help but respect it. Even when someone acts with ignorance or cruelty, you see that beneath their behavior is the same awareness, obscured but not destroyed. This recognition allows compassion to flow not as pity but as connection. You see yourself in them. You see that their suffering is not separate from your own. The practice of living with awareness does not remove responsibility. On the contrary, it deepens it. Because you see more clearly, you understand more deeply how your actions affect others. Words spoken in anger can wound for years. Acts of generosity can ripple far beyond what you ever know. Every moment becomes an opportunity to either add to the suffering of the world or to ease it. Living awake does not mean withdrawing from life. It means engaging more fully with clarity and care. This is why the path is not only about meditation cushions and quiet retreats. It is about traffic jams, family dinners, workplace stress, and city sidewalks. These are the real classrooms. Anyone can feel peaceful when the world is silent, but the challenge and the gift are to carry that awareness into the noise of ordinary life. To be mindful while washing dishes. To be present while talking with your child. To breathe consciously in the middle of an argument. These are the places where awareness becomes embodied, where freedom shows itself in action. In Western societies where speed and productivity are often worshipped, this way of living can feel radical. It asks you to slow down in a culture that constantly tells you to hurry. It asks you to value presence in a culture that prizes multitasking. It asks you to accept imperfection in a culture that demands polished appearances. Yet perhaps precisely because it is radical, it is healing. Slowing down is not laziness, it is wisdom. Presence is not inefficiency, it is depth. Acceptance is not weakness, it is strength. Think of how different a community might feel if more people lived this way. Imagine a classroom where teachers and students pause together for a breath before beginning. Imagine a courtroom where lawyers and judges remembered that every person before them carried both suffering and dignity. Imagine a marketplace where businesses measured success not only in profit but in how they contributed to the well-being of the community. These shifts may sound idealistic, but they begin with something simple: individuals living with awareness. the ripple effect is real. You may never know how much a single act of presence changes the course of another person's life. A kind word offered at the right time can stop someone from giving up. A moment of listening can ease years of loneliness. A calm presence in the middle of chaos can anchor those around you. These are not dramatic gestures. They are ordinary acts infused with awareness, and that is what makes them extraordinary. As you live this way, gratitude deepens. You stop taking life for granted. The fact that you woke up this morning becomes a gift. The breath moving through your body becomes a miracle. The sunlight on your skin, the laughter of a child, the taste of simple food, all of these become moments to savor. Gratitude is not a practice you force, but a natural response to awareness. And gratitude itself transforms suffering. It reminds you that even in hardship, life continues to offer beauty. Impermanence, once a source of fear, becomes a source of tenderness. Knowing that everything changes makes you hold each moment more gently. You do not cling as tightly, but you also do not dismiss. You savor because you know it will not last. And because you know it will not last, you cherish it more fully. A conversation, a touch, a season, a chapter of life, all are precious, precisely because they are fleeting. Impermanence becomes not a curse, but a teacher. This understanding even softens the approach to death. Instead of seeing death as the enemy, you begin to see it as part of the larger rhythm of existence. Awareness itself has never been born and will never die. The forms change, the stories end, but the open space of awareness remains. To glimpse this truth is to face mortality with more peace. Fear may still arise, but it is held within a larger trust, and that trust allows you to live more freely without being paralyzed by the thought of an ending. In this light, purpose itself is transformed. It is no longer about achieving something grand or leaving behind a legacy carved in stone. Purpose is found in the way you live now. To live with awareness, to embody compassion, to act with integrity, this is purpose. Whether you are raising children, working in an office, planting a garden, or caring for the sick, purpose shines through when awareness guides you. You do not need to wait for a distant achievement. You are living your purpose each time you are present. And so the great question that haunts so many people, what is the meaning of life, dissolves into a simpler truth. The meaning of life is life itself. It is to be here now, awake to the miracle of existence. It is to participate fully in the unfolding of each moment without needing to cling or control. It is to live with eyes open, heart open, mind open. That is enough. Perhaps this is why Zen teachings so often emphasize ordinariness. A flower, a cup of tea, a step taken in silence, these are not trivial. They are the places where the whole truth is revealed. To recognize the sacred in the ordinary is to understand that you were never separate from it. The miracle was always here. You simply needed to notice. The invitation then is not complicated. It is not about mastering 1,000 techniques or adopting exotic practices. It is about pausing long enough to notice awareness itself. It is about remembering again and again that you are already whole, and from that remembering to live, to breathe as a free person, to walk as a free person, to love as a free person. This freedom is not a distant goal. It is not waiting at the end of years of striving. It is here in the breath you are taking now. It is here in the awareness that is reading these words. To see this clearly is to come home to yourself. And coming home, you discover that the journey is over, even as it continues. You live not in search, but in celebration. Not in fear, but in presence. Not in craving, but in freedom. And so the path that began with a restless question ends with a quiet recognition. The question was never about finding something outside. It was about seeing what has always been inside. The peace you longed for is here. The freedom you sought is here. The purpose you chased is here. All of it hidden in plain sight, waiting for you to notice. At the close of this journey, what becomes clear is that the questions that once seemed so urgent, why am I here, what is my purpose, how can I be happy, were never meant to be answered by chasing more achievements, possessions, or recognition. They were meant to guide us inward, back to the awareness that has been with us all along. We search outside ourselves for decades, pouring effort into filling a sense of lack, and yet the peace we long for is as close as the next breath. Happiness, as we often define it, is fragile. It rises and falls with circumstances. It depends on whether the world aligns with our desires, whether things go our way, whether we feel secure and admired. But this kind of happiness is like water in a leaking bucket. It slips away no matter how much we pour in. The deeper invitation is to discover a steadier source of fulfillment, one that does not depend on changing conditions. That source is awareness itself, the open presence that holds every experience without clinging or resistance. When we live from awareness, ordinary life is transformed. Eating a meal becomes an act of gratitude. Listening to a friend becomes a practice of compassion. Even difficulties are no longer enemies to fight, but teachers that reveal where we are still clinging, where we are still afraid. Awareness does not erase suffering, but it changes our relationship to it. Pain is still pain, but it is no longer the whole story. There is always a larger sky holding the storm. This shift also redefines purpose. Purpose is not waiting at the end of some distant achievement. It is expressed here and now, in the way we live each moment. To meet life with integrity, to act with kindness, to walk with presence, this is purpose. Whether your life is simple or complex, public or private, its meaning is not measured by size but by depth. Every breath lived in awareness fulfills the question of why we are here. And when we live this way, the ripples extend far beyond ourselves. Presence steadies those around us. Compassion softens divisions. Gratitude reminds others of the miracle of being alive. We may not change the whole world, but we change the world we touch. And sometimes that is enough to begin a larger transformation. So perhaps the greatest discovery is that nothing essential was ever missing. The peace we sought was here from the beginning. The freedom we longed for has always been within reach. The purpose we chased was never separate from the act of living itself. To recognize this is to come home not to a new place, but to the place we never left. Breathe as a free person. Walk as a free person. Live as a free person. In that simplicity, life reveals its meaning, and that is more than enough.